Welcome to Living Chassidus. Together, let's live the Chassidus we learn. Welcome, everybody. A good vach, a good yom tov. We are here at Living Chassidus. Living Chassidus is an organization based in Crown Heights in Brooklyn, and we care for the incredible women that are post-seminary that come to Crown Heights, usually around shidduchim age and stage. I also want to make a big shout out to a beautiful Shabbaton that we are currently running for our married alumni who are hanging out together. So sending lots of love to them over there. Right now, this is our second Farbrengen as part of our systematic Avodah initiative for the Hasidic New Year. So systematic Avodah initiative is a program that we do that entails daily reading. You have one page of reading, and at the bottom of the page or at some point on the page, there's a piece that says exercise based on the reading. So during Elul and Tishrei, there's readings about Elul and Tishrei. And during the month of Kislev, there are readings in preparation for the holidays, the incredible holidays of Kislev and some of the holidays of Teves. So the last few days, we've been reading leading up to Tes and Yud Kislev. We've been reading about the Mitteler Rebbe, his birth, his yahrzeit, release, and all of these things. And as people do their reading, they also have questions as part of the reading, and they are meant to do at least one journal entry into a beautiful journal that Living Chassidus gives to you. The entry is between you and Hashem, and we trust you if you tell us you've done it. And for everybody that has done their daily reading and has done at least one journal entry a week, you get to earn yourself a beautiful prize at every Farbrengen that we have. So I want to say a huge mazel tov to everybody. As soon as I have the names, I will announce them. But right now I do not have the names of everybody who did it. But a huge mazel tov to everybody who just earned themselves. I don't know if you can see it properly, but it's a translation called it's called Praying with Passion. It's a translation of Kuntras Inyan Tefillah, a guide to prayer, and it's a kuntras, it's a booklet. I can't really say it's a maamer. It's a full booklet about davening, and it is actually from our from the Mitteler Rebbe, who we're celebrating today and tomorrow in Meretz Hashem, and it is translated and adapted into English by our speaker today, which is a great zchus. So not only do you get to hear from him speak, you also now earned yourselves a sefer, and it was edited and annotated by Rabbi Mira Markel and Rabbi Yehuda Shimon Markel, and it was donated. All of our svarim tonight were donated by Rabbi Markel. So thank you very, very much for the donation, and may we go Michael El Chayil. Now, we have the most incredible zchus to have not just the author or the translator of this book, but the way I originally heard about Rabbi Walters was because he was in yeshiva with my husband, and at that time this was a hidden treasure that we somehow got through their friendship, and I've been trying to learn it. I've been successfully learning it for a few years. It's absolutely incredible, and actually I want to give another shout out to my husband, who now has the newer version, which is available on Amazon. If everybody would like, you can search The Gate of Unity, Shar Yichud of the Mitteler Rebbe and Rabbi Walters, and you can get it on Amazon. And now my husband has a daily chavrusa with one of his friends, 15 minutes every day, where they learn Shar Yichud from this sefer. Rabbi Walters is joining us from Chicago, correct?
That's correct.
Yes, amazing. And this is why we have the great zchus of having it on Zoom. So a huge thank you to the world of Zoom that helps us connect with speakers from all over. And yes, I will pass on the floor to Rabbi Walters now. Thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely, my pleasure. So good yom tov, everyone. So I'm going to speak a little bit about the Mitteler Rebbe and his Chassidus in general, and then we'll learn a few selections which I should have been shared with you somehow. And I also shared another maamer of the Mitteler Rebbe that I translated for my son bar mitzvah. If anybody would like to learn that, it's a wonderful maamer. And
Thank
that
you.
was actually the maamer that every Rebbe had a maamer that they would say every few years to purify the air, and this was the maamer the Mitteler Rebbe would say. And maybe we'll say a few highlights from that as well. So
Now,
first,
I'll just mention, if anybody doesn't yet have the copies, you can personal message me. I did send it out to as many people as I could think of. And if you are here, you can also personal message me and I will send you the copies.
and there might be a way to link it in the Zoom as well, I'm not sure. Okay, so yeah, the Mitteler Rebbe in general, his way of learning and teaching Chassidus was very special. Already beginning from the times of his father, he would, teach. He would like explain the maamer of his father, especially so he was put in charge of the younger Hasidim, the younger life, and he would teach them and explain things to them, kind of bring with them. But even when he was very young by his nature, the Alter Rebbe said that he wanted to originally name him Hamnuna, which means like a fish, because his neshama was like a fish that could walk on dry land, that even when they're in the world, they're totally connected to Elokus, and they see everything as Elokus. But the Alter Rebbe's Rebbe, the Maggid, asked him to name him Dever after him, and so he named him Dever instead. And there's a lot of stories. I don't know if we have time to get into all those stories. There's a lot of stories about the nature of the Mitteler Rebbe and his neshama and his seder and avodah. But one of the really special qualities of how the Mitteler Rebbe taught Hasidus was that he would really explain everything very, very at length and really bring it into a lot of mishalim that are very relatable, much more close to understanding. And this is something that carried over also somewhat in general in the style of the Rebbeim afterwards. I mean, Alter Rebbe already towards the end of his life started saying maamer more in this style that were longer and more explained. But the Mitteler Rebbe really, that was his style in a tremendous way. And it's worth noting that like the Rebbe Rashab's style is the most connected to the Mitteler Rebbe, that a lot of times the Rebbe Rashab's maamer are actually maamer of the Mitteler Rebbe with added explanations. But anyway, his style was with a lot of explanations and with a very big geschmack in learning Hasidus. At that time, in general, the Mitteler Rebbe really wanted the Hasidim to have a big geschmack in Hasidus and in the Avodah. It's a famous thing that he wanted that when two Hasidim would meet, they should speak about Yichudei Ilah and Yichudei Tah, the upper unity, the lower unity. And this is something that to a large degree really came to happen in the times of the Mitteler Rebbe. At those days, in order to come hear maamerim, there you had to come at a certain time, and you had to chazer the maamer at every town you stopped off on the way home. So they were spreading Hasidus, and a lot of even young Hasidim became very accustomed to learning in a very deep way. And by having to give it over, they also understood it much better and became very familiar with it in a much deeper way. Also, the Mitteler Rebbe encouraged that Hasidim should learn together as a group. They should come to the Rebbe together. So instead of just people, each one making their own trip to come visit, they should get together, everybody from the town or whatever, 10 people, 20 people, however many people could come. They should come together as a group. They should hear the maamer, they should study it together, talk about it together, and go back. And that's a very important thing that applies now also, that it's much more beneficial when you can do something together as a group and have learn together and to bring about it together and work together in a way that it's much more beneficial and has a lot more meaning of obvious Yisrael there than just everyone doing it on their own. There's a tremendous letter, and there's some of these letters about the Mitteler Rebbe's Hasidus and things printed in the back of some of the new editions of his Sfarim. So if you have the new Derech Chaim or the new Emrei Bina, possibly some of the other newer Sfarim that I don't have the newest edition maybe of, they printed some of the letters about different things about it. And there's a letter where the Rebbe's father of Leivik explains very at length about the uniqueness of the Mitteler Rebbe. It was a letter for Tes Kislev. And he explains that there's an idea in like Kabbalah that there's something called Or Chayas Kayach. There's the idea of a light, and then there's the idea of Chayas, which is like giving life or consciousness. And then there's the idea of Kayach, which is like when either seeing or hearing or any of our faculties. And he explains that the level of R is where something is affecting it from above, but it doesn't, like the aura of the neshama shines on the body, but it doesn't come into the body. Level of chayas is where the neshama becomes one with the body and connects with it. and the level of kayak is where it relates to what's outside, beyond the body. And he explains how the Alter Rebbe, the Mitteler Rebbe, and the Tzemach Tzedek corresponded to these three approaches of Ar, Chayes, and Kayak. And so that's why we find that the Mitteler Rebbe's Maimarim are called like Taras Chaim, his Sefer. The Alter Rebbe's Sefer on the Parshias is called Tara Ar. The Mitteler Rebbe's is called Taras Chaim. And also he explains that's connected to why the Mitteler Rebbe's Sfarim are all called Shar, a gate, because like there's the Shari Ira and Shara Muna and Shara Yichud. In Imre Bina also there's Shar Kriyashma and Shar Tzitzis and Shar Tfilin. There's Shari Tshuva and Shar Tfila. That's the way the Mitteler Rebbe's Sfarim are named. They're all called a Shar. And he says this idea of a Shar is connected to this idea of Chayes, that it's being explained in a very big, broad way, and that the style of Mitteler Rebbe's Chassidus is that it gives you an understanding that can really become part of you, and you can have a real geschmack in it in a way that becomes one with you. And he says that this is very much connected to actually the type of learning of Mashiach and the Gilia Yechida. And the Rebbe speaks about this idea also, how specifically learning in this way of the Mitteler Rebbe's Chassidus is very connected to helping to bring Mashiach and bring us to that deeper level where, we can learn ideas and we know them and they kind of affect us in a way of Emunah, but the ultimate goal of Chassidus is that it should be something that we really becomes part of us, it becomes one with us, and we have a chayas in it, and that's something that's accomplished through learning in this type of way. And then we also find more specifically that, like it says, the Sikha from the Friedrich Rebbe says that the Alter Rebbe demanded a Vitus Halev, and the Mitteler Rebbe the service of the heart, and the Mitteler Rebbe demanded a Vitus Hamayach, to service God with our mind. And it's interesting though, because he says, and the Rebbe has a whole letter actually explaining this Sikha and things, but he says that in order to understand what a Vitus Halev is, you have to learn the Mitteler Rebbe's Svarim of Shari Tshuva. So the Mitteler Rebbe has three volumes of Shari Tshuva, Chelik Aleph, Chelik Shari Tshuva, Shari Tefillah, they're together. Volume 1, 2, and then volume 3 is called Derech Chaim. And in order to understand what Avodas Hamayach is, serving God with the mind, a person has to learn the Siddur, Imdach, the Siddur with which the Mitteler Rebbe put together the Alter Rebbe's Maimarim on the Pirush HaMilos and put it in the Siddur, and Imre Bina. So you see that the Mitteler Rebbe's Maimarim, in a certain way, are like considered this Pesach to really being able to appreciate and understand and experience these different types of Avodah. And in addition to that, it says that the Mitteler Rebbe's Maimarim are organized in a tremendous way, where he wrote a special sefer for every type of chassid, both the Oivdim and the Maskilim, both those people that were more connected to serving Hashem with self-improvement and introspection and tshuva, and those that were connecting to serving Hashem more by understanding and his bindiness and things like that. And some of the Sfarim or Maimarim were actually even written or said for a specific chassid, just one person, and then were published for everyone. And so it explains that the Mitteler Rebbe's Sfarim are organized where there's the like side of Avodah and the side of Haskalah, and then there's Havana, which is kind of in between, which I think is the idea of understanding the reasons for the mitzvahs. So it says in each of these, in the Kav, in the pathway of Avodah, the Mitteler Rebbe has an introductory sefer, which is Kuntres HaSpilos, where he lays out there the basics of serving Hashem, and he explains the ultimate goal is that the whole purpose of Taras Chassidus is that the Alter Rebbe wanted, and is that we should be serving Hashem in a way that's really that's something that really affects us, emotionally and intellectually, and our ruts and our time and everything should be something that we really are moved by, and it shouldn't just remain, intellectual, just like a detached, like a philosophy. It has to be something that really moves us and affects us. And he actually explains there that there are 5 levels, according to the 5 levels of Neshama, Nefesh, Neshama, Chai, Yechida, that a person can be inspired or moved by their understanding. And you have those 5 levels in the Avodah that relates to Nefesh Bahamis, and then 5 levels that relate to Nefesh L'Kis. And in each level, he explains what it looks like and what the challenges are in that level and how to avoid those pitfalls. And so that's like, a general introduction to the Avodah. And then he has a beginner, intermediary, and advanced sefer on Avodah, which again is Shari Tshuva and Shari Tefillah Chelik Aleph, the first volume of Shari Tshuva. And then the second volume of Shar Tshuva, Shar Tefillah is the intermediate. And then Derech Chaim is the third volume of Shar Tshuva and Shar Tefillah, and that's the most advanced in his Avodah Sfarim. And but again, it says he wrote each of those for a different type of Ovid. Somebody's at a different level or different stage in their service of, their Avodah Hashem. And one of the big things, actually, I think one of the most important points of Kodesh Aspilos, which is introduction to Avodah, is that even though it's important to know like what level a person's on, but the main thing is that the goal is not to reach a certain level, to like, let's say, be serving Hashem at the level of the Chayer, the Yechida necessarily. The main thing is that a person should be honest with himself at what level they're on. And on that level, they should be truthful and sincere and serve Hashem on that level. And if you're working and do what you're supposed to do, so naturally you'll grow. From time to time, you'll reach a higher level. But the main thing is you're not trying to climb the ladder. You're trying to do, the Avodah where you are in the best way possible. And he says, actually, the real essence of the Yechida plugs into every single level. It can be revealed even in the lowest level. And he describes that, and that's actually even higher than the idea of having that essence of the Yechida revealed. Whatever level a person's on is higher and greater than even being at the highest level of the ladder or being, let's say, a tzaddik necessarily. That's really the main thing. So that's a very important little point and a highlight there. Some other highlights from what he discusses in those Sfarim. There's a big focus on that in order to be successful in our Avodah, we can't really succeed just by trying to fight the Yetzer Hara and with just our understanding and things like that. We need to have a special help from revealing what's called the makif of our neshama, the Yechida, the Chaya, and the Yechida. And when that's revealed, it becomes like a wall that protects us and automatically prevents us from having a lot of struggles and gives us a certain help from above and purity. And in order to achieve that, it's through specifically Kaddish Atzmacha b'Mitteler, by doing things, making yourself holy in things that are not specifically a mitzvah, but just your daily things, the way you eat and the way you sleep and the way that you do those kind of mundane things, or even just the way you talk. By trying to bring holiness into those things that are not a mitzvah per se, that actually gives you this deeper connection, because the idea is that it shows that that's really where your true desire is and your true identity is, because it's something that you're not necessarily obligated to do, but the fact that you're plugging yourself in, you're trying to connect there, that like tells your subconscious, so to speak, or it opens yourself up to this idea that this is really who I am, this is my identity, and that automatically gives you this deeper connection, which makes your whole Avodah much easier. And that's one of the big themes throughout the Shari Tshuva Sfarim. Then on the side of Haskalah, there's again an introductory sefer that's like an opening, which is Shar HaYichud, and then there's a beginner, intermediate, and advanced sefer. So the beginning sefer is Shar HaMuna, which is printed together with Shar HaYichud in the sefer Ner Mitzvot Tarar. The intermediate sefer is Ateres Reish, and the advanced sefer is Imrei Bina. And so the general theme in those Sfarim is about Achdus Hashem, to understand God's unity. And through understanding that, that's the foundation of our whole Avodah and our love and fear of Hashem and all these kind of things. And like we'll see in the selection that I have here, it's also the foundation of our Ahavas Yisrael, which is in a way one of the most fundamental expressions of our belief in God's unity, is unity with other people. And so there, again, he has an introductory sefer, which is Shar Yichud, which there he kind of explains first how to do his Bayanos, and then gives an explanation of the entire Seder Shalshos from the top down. And that kind of is meant to be, it's called the Kiddush Chassidus, which it says there's of the Mitteler Rebbe Sfarim, there are two Sfarim that says it for all Chassidim, and it's brought in Hayim Yaim, and this is one of them. It's Hayim Yaim from Shushan Purim. And so this is called the Kiddush Chassidus, that it like unlocks, just knowing what all the words mean and everything, and knowing all the stations. So that's the first thing. Then Shar Muna is themed off of the progression from Pesach and the Gula of Pesach to Kriyas Yamsuf on Shvi Shal Pesach, Chachan Shal Pesach, and then finally the Gula Hasida, the Mashiach. So progressing from Yetzias Mitzrayim to Mashiach, that's kind of the theme of the Sefer. And the idea there is that he's explaining that we're starting out with just simple emunah. Then we develop understanding and das and maturity. But in order to really have perfection in our avodas Hashem and our connection to Hashem, to really understand Hashem, it can't just be through intellect. It has to be starting from and founded on that simple emunah. And then when we plug that simple emunah into our understanding, we bring the two together, then we can achieve the Gili of Mashiach, where we can really see godliness in the world around us. And it's so, just the emunah alone, just the seifa alone won't be able to do it, but putting the two together, that gives us that ability. So I wanted to just go through a couple selections here so I have here the introduction to, the introduction to the Sefer Shar Emunah is very long, but I took a little bit from near the end, which I find very, very powerful and very important. And it's a theme that we find also a little bit in Tanya, these kind of things, and this is the importance of how Avos Yisrael is intrinsically connected to our belief in Hashem. Like the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, that if a person has a bad thought about another Jew, he has to push it away like a thought of a Avodah Zarah. Or the Rebbe Shab describes how if a person thinks a bad thing about another Jew, it's like if a king chooses something and then you speak against it, it's like rebelling against the king. You're saying he made a bad choice. So here, in a similar way, the Mitteler Rebbe discusses this connection. And so he's explaining the idea of how previously, right before this, how in the time of the first Beis Hamikdash, godliness was very revealed. There was miracles revealed in the Beis Hamikdash. There were Nevi'im, there was prophecy, and all these things. And so therefore, since the world and the Jewish people were on this higher spiritual state where they were connecting to godliness in this way, the challenge to that was false prophets and Avodah Zarah and these kind of things, that there was this challenge to get people to believe in these false beliefs about God and godliness directly. But now he's talking about how that changed in the time of the second Beis Hamikdash. So I'm going to be starting from the beginning of this sheet here. This is again from it's in the end of the introduction of Shar Emunah, and I was able to get this online. If you go to Chabad Library .com or .org or something, they have a lot of svarim there in text that you could format, you can copy and paste. That's where I got it from, in case anybody is looking for it, doesn't have to save it. But in the time of the second Beis Hamikdash, so then spiritually the world was on a much lower level. It was lacking, it says 5 things. They didn't have the Aron. So in the Beis Hamikdash, in the whole Kodesh Kodashim, they didn't have the Aron Kodesh. So a lot of times when people draw, let's say, pictures of the Kohen Gadol doing the Avodah, they'll draw the second Beis Hamikdash, but they'll draw the Aron there. That's not correct. In the second Beis Hamikdash, they didn't have the Aron. They didn't have the Luchais, which were in the Aron. They didn't have Nevuah. They already lost prophecy. They just had Ruach HaKodesh and a Baskal, but they didn't have full Nevuah anymore. They didn't have the Man. They didn't have these different things. The Urim B'Tumim. They didn't have the names inside to answer their questions and things like that. So those different spiritual revelations were missing. Rak Or Elokim Ma'at Mizer Nishar B'Baskal, which is a little bit of godly light that was still shining into the world through a Baskal. A Baskal means an echo, really. And this idea that godliness is not being revealed directly through a Nevuah, but it's being revealed indirectly. Sheshimshu B'Ychulu, so they're able to still use a Baskal, like in the time of the Gemara. There's many stories about how they would use a Baskal. So there wasn't a full gili of godliness directly, even in the Holy of Holies of the second Beis Hamikdash. In the time of the first Beis Hamikdash, there was the revelation of God's essence that transcends the world, and therefore there was the Aron with the Luchais, which is direct revelation of God's wisdom and His will. There was the idea that the Aron and Midah, that it didn't take up space, even though it was there, it was openly revealed how it was beyond space, and there would be open miracles. And so there was this revelation of godliness that was very direct. But in the time of the second Beis Hamikdash, godliness wasn't revealed directly. Rak al yidei levush mastir ha'atzmi, but it was only being revealed through some sort of garment that was covering and concealing that essential light that was being expressed through these other ways in the physical Beis Hamikdash. And also it was revealed only through these more external expressions, services of the Mizbeach, where they had karbanos and the table and the menorah with the lechem upon him, and they would light the menorah. So this is the way that godliness was revealed when it comes down into the world in the way of maamer. In other words, the way that the maamer is how godliness is revealed in a way that we can understand it within our own limitations. So like, for example, our neshama, the way it's revealed in our body, we experience it, we can see, we can hear, we experience consciousness in a limited way, but the real essence of our neshama, of what it is, even our own neshama, we don't really know what it is. We don't experience directly. We just see how it's manifest within our body, but that's a very small part of it. So in a similar way, and even physically, like most of who we are and most of what keeps us alive is things that we don't understand. We don't know how our blood works and how all the cells in us work and all these things. We're not constantly aware of telling our heart to beat and our lungs to breathe and all these kind of things. It happens. It's being Hashem does it for us. And so in a similar way, most of the, what's revealed within the world, that is just this very limited expression, what we can understand and appreciate of God is a very limited thing. And the idea of Seder Klomen is how God is, in essence, the idea of revealing how God is essentially that he transcends the limits of the world. And that's, really in everything, that God is choosing everything, controlling everything, way beyond anything that we have awareness of or control of. So
Can I ask, sorry, just to be clear, I have a few people asking me, we're doing the maamer that says, the title of it's Pure Air, right?
No, I'm doing this paper that I sent.
The one that says Mitteler Rebbe.
I'm doing the introduction to Sharmuna.
Ah, perfect. Okay, now everybody's on the same page.
Okay.
Thank you
Sorry
so
for the confusion.
No problem. Thank you.
I'm on the 4th line here.
Okay, great.
And I'm sorry I don't have this in English, but I just think it's very geschmack, so I want to share.
I'm going to try and see if I can share the screen so that everybody can see.
Do you want me to share or you'll share the screen? Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
And so therefore, since godliness was not revealed directly, but it was only revealed as it comes down into the physical world or into these lower expressions. So therefore, the klippa that was opposing it also wasn't opposing directly the belief in God, but it was opposing only how godliness comes down into the world. The Muna Zara Gamkin, the Muna Zara here, Kapanim Ba'alakim, Laimar HaKecha, Bumazel, Hua Iker, Hamashpia, Shnikra, Muna Zara Ba'alakim, Shinasan Elikim, Han Haga, Lekov Mazales, Ukai Gavana. So it wasn't in these false beliefs, these like false religious beliefs, really, believing in paganism that God, gave control to different stars or mazales, and therefore we should worship them or serve them. That like in those from the time of the second Beis Mikdash until today, the challenge of those beliefs is really mostly gone from the world. So being that in the time of the second Beis Mikdash and until now, there wasn't this revelation of the full force of the belief in godliness, the way that God's essence transcends the world. That wasn't something that was manifest down here of seeing, open miracles and those kind of things. So therefore, there wasn't this opposition to that of having false prophets and things like that. But instead, the opposition of the klippa, since the time of the second Beis Mikdash, is in false beliefs that relate to the world. And this is the idea of sinas chinim, of baseless hatred. That was the time of the second Beis Mikdash, and unfortunately, we still have to correct it. The main cause and source of sinas chinim is coming from a misplaced emunah, from a incorrect, hijacked emunah. The klippos come and they hijack the emunah. That's because a person believes the stories and lashon hara that somebody tells about their fellow, and they become very moved by this, and they start viewing, now they re-believe it to the point where they view this person as their enemy that's trying to kill them, literally, that's like pursuing their whole life. And then that person also believes all kind of false things about the first person. And they become enemies because of these false things that they were told. But if they wouldn't believe the stories that they were being told that this person's out to get him, then then each person would be sure in his heart that this person has the best intentions and he has good intentions, and each of the other person would also believe that about him. And they would be the best friends. And they would be seeking out the benefit of each other instead of trying to get each other. But it's only because they have this false belief that they imagine, they project that this person is scheming and out to get me. And because each person believes this thing, they're living off of this fantasy. Behind ruach avuim shenimshach lahafer bein advegim kulum kadesh yikitrug l'mayla of kulam. And this is this spirit of strife that is brought down by the klippas to cause strife between friends or communities and things like that, so that there should be a decree above against all of them, right? Because when there's not achdus and there's not shalom, so then they can decree, look, they're fighting with each other. That when a person has this enemy physically and they're fighting physically, that awakens, God forbid, judgments and ketrugim, very harsh things on the person's soul above. And this arouses upon the person that this kitrug causes the person to then sin, which then that sin leads to become like a whip that can, God forbid, bring punishment on the person. And so too, from this hatred, it brings these ketrugim. This whole thing is just a ma'isa satan. The satan is coming and he's confusing everybody and lying to everybody and getting them to believe these false things. Last is proved him to make the separation between them. And this is the cause for the how long our gullus is. And there's no community where you don't have this thing where people have this sinas chinam because they believe false things against the other people, and therefore they're fighting. They think they're out to get each other, and this arouses all these ketrugim and destroys everything, God forbid. Especially in our Dar Yasam. So he's speaking in those times, especially there was a lot of fighting between the Chassidim and the Maznagdim and all these kind of things, and even within the Chassidim between there was a lot of people that with the Alter Rebbe already it was complicated. There was a lot of politics going on already, and it made a lot of problems. And that's actually what caused the Alter Rebbe and the Mitteler Rebbe to be in jail, was from from this infighting of Jews with each other, and that's what caused the Korban Bayis Sheni. Also, if you look at history, unfortunately, it was a very tragic situation then too. And even Hanukkah, also, by the way, we're coming up to Hanukkah, that the persecutions really began because of the fighting with the Jews among themselves, and the Hellenists were seeking support from the Greeks, and that's what led to the persecutions. It wasn't the policy of the Greeks to go around persecuting people, religious persecution. That even in the leaders of the generation, there's a lot of sinas chinam and a lot of this kind of fighting. And this is an introduction to a sefer, which is not an Avodah sefer per se. It's the sefer is about emunas Hashem, but this is the idea that the idea of our belief in Achdus Hashem and God's unity, that these days, the main expression of that is in Avos Yisrael and being able to have unity with another person. And the main challenge to that is sinas chinam. And so one of the big things in our Avodah, in our work to Avodas Hashem and to really understand and internalize what we're learning Chassidus, is to counter that and train ourselves to believe with simple emunah, just as we believe in the one God, that our friend, our fellow, really they're our brother, they're our sister, they want what's good for us, we want what's good for them, and maybe there's some things on the outside that's not allowing it to be expressed. But if we believe in that, and we connect to that, and we talk to that part of them, that we'll be able to make that connection, and that's really there. Like the famous story with Aaron, how Aaron would go to two people that were fighting and say, really, he regrets it, he wants to make up, and he's just embarrassed. He would tell that to both of them, and it wasn't a lie because he saw this and he believed this was so clearly that the people, they really want to be friends, they want to work together, they're really brothers, and it's just these false beliefs that are getting in the way. Like it was in the time of the second base of Mikdash, and that's what caused again the destruction. If you read the history of it, it's very tragic. Iker hasina shalovad amuna ledavar rechilos lashon hara shekerhu, and aside from the false belief that come from believing these stories that people tell, lashon hara and rechilos and these kind of things about other people, hu hakina la'asher matzliach b'karnasasai, is this kind of class warfare where people are hate or are envious of a rich person and somebody successful in their parnasa, then sheikanu by they're envious of him, they're jealous of him, the sanehu, and they'll hate the taklis, and they hate them. And this was soon before the communist revolution and things like that. And this is unfortunately due to our many sins, this is very common. And so because of this, people are saying things against speaking against each other and things like that. So on the one hand, he's saying that people shouldn't hate somebody that's successful. On the other hand, he says that this can come onto a rich person if he doesn't think about and care for the poor people and show pity and compassion to them. He just feels, no, it's all for myself. And so he takes all the profits for himself and all the work and things he puts on the poor workers. He do it to make it easy for himself, right? So if somebody's oppressing their whatever their workers, the servants of these poor people, so then it causes this, and it goes both ways of each person not seeing the humanity and appreciating the other person. And I think, I wouldn't not Kedai get into too much, but I think these days, even in the world in general, you see a lot of this, in politics and class warfare and racial tensions and all these things, which are all totally a Maisa Satan, and in the world at large, but definitely within the Jewish people and within the Chabad for sure. In Hasidim, we should all definitely strengthen our emunah in each other, which is an expression of our emunah in Hashem. So this is, I think, just a very powerful piece from his introduction to Emunah, and it shows that even these deepest ideas in the Haskalah of Hasidus, of understanding these things about godliness, how the world's created, and Seder Shavshas, and all these things, the ultimate purpose and expression of that is in very, simply and practically being able to, when we learn to see the godliness in ourselves, then we can also see the godliness in other people, and we can see how we're connected and have this sense of Achdus and Ahavas Yisrael, and correct the cause of our galus and bring the Gula Shlema. So that's one piece that I think is worth taking a look at. Another piece here is this introduction to Imre Bina. So the Sefer Imre Bina is again like the most advanced sefer in the path of the Haskalah Sfarim, and it was written specifically for the Chassid Rabbi Kislev Lepler. Rabbi Kislev Lepler was a Chassid of the Alter Rebbe, and he was a very fiery Chassid, and he once came to the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe was sitting in his room, and he stuck his head in the Alter Rebbe's window, and he said, "Rebbe, cut off my left side," meaning cut off my Yetzer Hara. And the Alter Rebbe put his head down on the table on the Dveikus, and then he picked his head up, and he said, "Doesn't it say that you give life to everyone?" And from then on, Rabbi Kislev Lepler would get these like spontaneous inspiration, and he would, when he was struck by it, he would dance. He would make whoever was with him dance, and he was like a very fiery chassid. But he didn't have a great knowledge or understanding of Torah and non-Chassidus. And then in the times of the Mitteler Rebbe, one of these younger Chassidim that, like we mentioned, the Mitteler Rebbe required all the Chassidim to come and repeat what they learned in every town on their way home. And one of these Chassidim came to his town and repeated the maamerim, and he saw that this young chassid understood it very well, And here he was an old chassid, he didn't understand it. I mean, a much older chassid. I think he was already a chassid for about 40 years at that time. And he was very disturbed by that. And so he asked the person to come and to explain it to him. And he tried a few times to explain it to him, but he just couldn't understand it, wouldn't go in. And so he decided right then he's going to the Rebbe, at that time the Mitteler Rebbe. So he went into Yechidus, and he told him that, he's bothered, he wanted to understand Chassidus. So the Mitteler Rebbe told him that it all depends on your ratzon, that if you want, you'll be able to understand. You have to, you'll be able to break your head. And so he committed that he's not going to leave Lubavitch until he succeeds in breaking his head and is able to understand. And so he spent, a long time, I think it was 6 months or something, saying Tillim and fasting and just studying until he, was able to break his head and was able to start understanding it. From then on, he had a tremendously deep understanding of Chassidus, and to the point where the Mitteler Rebbe wrote this sefer especially for him. And this is like the deepest sefer. And actually later, the Rebbe Rashab, when he was working on learning it, he sent the Frierdiker Rebbe with questions because this Rebbe Kislev was still alive, was very old. And he went to him and he said he'll make him a deal that he'll answer his questions if he'll answer the questions that he has on the Rebbe Rashab's maamer, and he'll go back and forth to his father. And the Frierdiker Rebbe said it was some of the best times of his life when he was going back and forth with these questions and these answers and things like that. And it seems that Imre Bina, the Hemshech Ayin Beis of the Rebbe Rashab, which is the Rebbe Rashab's longest and most, and deepest Hemshech of Maimarim, is based on a section of Imre Bina. And the Rebbe Rashab describes how much exertion he put into, says how that he lost a lot of hair from the mental exertion of studying Imre Bina. And it's a very, also one thing that's worth pointing out here is that the style, and the Rebbe brings this down also, but Mitteler himself said, the style of the Mitteler's Maimarim, the way they're written, is very different from the Alter Rebbe's. So for example, there was a chassid that the Mitteler Rebbe told to study Tanya and Imre Bina. And after he studied them and he came back, he had a lot of questions on Imre Bina. So the Mitteler Rebbe told him that the way I wrote my Imre Bina is not like the way my father wrote Tanya. When he wrote Tanya, he was medayik in every single letter, and even just on one vav. But when I wrote the sefer, I wasn't as medayik in the words like that. And so to understand it, you have to learn it once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, then you understand it. And in general, that's the style the Rebbe says that, like, if some of the Rebbeim, they were very medayik in the words, and in general, like certain svarim, there's an inyan to be medayik of the exact wording, like in the Mishnah, we do that. The Gemara, we don't do that. And the same thing, in the Alter Rebbe's Maimarim, we are learn things that are very medayik in the exact wording. And the Mitteler's Maimarim, that's not the style of how it was written, how it should be learned. It's more that you have to learn the whole thing and understand the flow. And only from understanding the big picture and the flow can you really understand the words. But sometimes if the words are unclear, you need to, if you just try to look at the words, it won't be so clear unless you get the whole picture. So anyway, it was a little bit a different style of teaching and learning. But here's a very, again, a piece from towards the end of his introduction in Imre Bina that I think is worth taking a look at. And here the Rebbe is talking about the importance of Achdus Hashem, learning about God's unity, and that a person shouldn't, and the proper way to learn it. So previously, before this, he was explaining the importance of not learning it in order to, be able to show off one's knowledge and be just to know levels and names of, the Kabbalah and things like that, to be like a Makubal. He says, like, is customary amongst the Mekubalim. He says that's not the proper way to learn it. Because the purpose of learning all these things is not just to know names of levels and angels and things like that, as if it's its own, like just some separate thing. The whole point is to see how God's essence permeates everything, and it's all just uniting with Him and not making it a whole separate thing. So that's one thing, not to have that kind of arrogance that comes from that. But here he goes the other way, that sometimes people excuse themselves from this obligation because of a false humility, and he speaks to that, not to have that kind of false humility. That every single person should take to heart. And the Mitteler Rebbe is very aware of what's going on. He says, even though you don't have a lot of time, you're busy with your work, but the little extra time, free time you have, person shouldn't say, listen, I know who I am, and I know how low I am. I know that I'm on a very low level and serving Hashem. I know I'm so busy. I don't have time to really learn and daven properly. So because of that, a person might say, Mi anaychi, who am I? Who am I to come to these high levels in his in studying and contemplating godliness, coming to things that are deeper than what the mind and the heart can contain, to really come to like an awareness, a spiritual awareness of the neshama that's beyond understanding, that's really, again, plugging the emunah into the understanding. Why should I walk in this path of things that are great beyond me, that are greater than me? So he says, you have to know with certainty that if a person excuses himself with this kind of humility, that he's like liable to the death, so to speak. And excusing oneself from this mitzvahs, it's almost as serious as not putting on tefillin or not wearing tzitzis or the like. Because someone who doesn't put on tefillin is called a rebellious person with their body. They're rebelling against God with their body. But this is rebelling against God with the soul. That person's not developing their emunah in God's unity and things like, which is the whole foundation of the whole Torah mitzvahs. That this command to know God and Shema Yisrael, which is again the idea of bringing our emunah into understanding. That's what I explained previously, that the whole idea of the mitzvah is not just to leave it in emunah, and it's not just understanding, it's to bring the emunah into understanding. That the entire life of our godly soul, with having the light of Torah mitzvahs and the service of the heart and davening, that the ability for Torah mitzvahs and our Veish B'Leiv to really affect us and shine into our neshama depends on strengthening our emunah and bringing that emunah b'pnimius through this mitzvah of knowing Hashem. And every person according to their ability. Again, you don't have to do it on somebody else's ability, but each person according to whatever level they can. And there's actually a beautiful long story where the Friedrich Rebbe describes how even the simple Hasidim were able to have a very deep appreciation of Hasidus, even though they didn't have necessarily intellectually such a deep, knowledge and understanding, but they had, through their sincere avodah, they had the refinement to really 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 understand and appreciate the real depth of teaching of Hasidus. And so this is something even every person can connect and to on their level. Even if you just know how to read, even if you don't have to be the biggest intellectual. So people think it's only for this big, no. If you know how to read, you can do it. A person has to exert himself with all of his ability to understand whatever they can of God's unity, of Seiv, Kalam, and Mali Kalam, the name of Havaya, the name of Elokim, this idea of how God is both beyond the world and how we see godliness revealed in the world. So those two aspects of, again, appreciating how really Hashem is much beyond what we can understand. Like we said, the example, even our own neshama, the essence of what it really is beyond us. We don't know it. But then also to see how we do see how our neshama comes into us and affects us, and how we see godliness in the world, and we see Ashkaf Partas and all these things. So those are the two aspects of it. And to be aware, appreciate, both, to have the humility that comes from realizing that God is beyond our understanding and beyond the world, and to have that sense of intimacy and closeness with godliness that comes from seeing Him in the world and in everything around us. And this is the entire purpose of man. In our entire life, that the light of God's unity should be literally that this, how God is united literally with the physical world, should be something that is implanted very firmly into our minds and our hearts. And anyone who casts off this yoke, this sense of responsibility, and feels like, I don't have to do this, not for me, I don't have to do it, and he fools himself with these fantasies, for example, this kind of false humility, it's only the advice of the Yetzer Hara, to push the person away and to distance him from the light of the face of God, so that he won't be able to perceive the light of God in his mind and his heart. so that he won't have that awareness of godliness. V'zehu siba b'shorish l'chol dinin kashan l'mshachim al chol ish l'fi darkei, and Rahman al-Islam, this is the source of all the harsh judgments that come upon a person. Like it says, they're not a nation of understanding. They don't try to understand Hashem, and that's the introduction to describing all kinds of things that are negative. Like it said, the Navi rebukes the Jewish people that my people don't know me. They're not misbeinen. They don't try to study to contemplate godliness. Woe to this sinful nation. And it says in Parshat Vayelech, and therefore I'm going to hide my face from them. And they'll be consumed by their enemies, and they'll have all kinds of, God forbid, all kinds of troubles. And they'll say on that day, then they'll recognize that it's because God is not in me that these things happen. And this is all the troubles of parnasa and things like that. And like it says, Chazal say that the greatest poverty is a poverty in das, in understanding, or in whatever. So really, it's das is like explained in that maamer, that the other maamer that we included. The idea of das is really what we associate ourselves with, what is our priority. So when a person's priorities is in the wrong things, when a person attaches themselves to things in the physical world, and that's their whole priority in life and their whole identity, so that's what causes a person all kinds of troubles. When a person attaches himself to God and godliness, so then they are freed from all those troubles and they're able to go in a smooth, good way. And this is what it means that they'll be consumed spiritually. That spiritually, by not connecting to godliness in this way, not having this awareness of godliness, so then our spiritual awareness becomes swallowed up, God forbid. And then that spiritual lack of our neshama shining leads a person to go astray and cause all kinds of physical problems too, God forbid. It's a takeif adin and akashim atrigim rabim v'maylu v'mata lo'era sina v'leiv lirdei ad l'charma v'luchanius v'lu. Kumayish kosav lamarov shu goyim hu al amcha yirimu side v'hu v'nachidim yigoy v'liyizakar shem yisrael v'chulu. And he describes, how the different kitrugim and things like that. And all of this is again because God is not within me. Elokai mamish, that should be the idea of Elokai, means it should be my God, which means that it should be something that I understand and feel a personal connection to. It shouldn't just be like the Friedrich Rebbe says that we say in Az Yashir in davening, Zeh Keli v'Anveyu, this is my God, and I will extol him, the God of my father, and I will exalt him. So he says that if it's Zekeli, if we relate to God personally, where we try to understand and connect to God on a personal level, so then it's Anveyu, it's Ani V'hu. The word Anveyu is the two words combined, Ani and V'hu. Me, it's I and he, that we have this direct personal connection, that it's like me and God directly, that Hashem is right here with us. But if it's Elokei Avi, if we just rely on, well, it's my tradition, but I don't personally connect to it, it's just the God of my father, so then then God is like very high. It's like he's up there in seventh heaven somewhere, but we don't have that personal connection. And so the Friedrich says a person's always at a crossroad in his avodas Hashem. Am I going to take the path of Keli, it's going to be my God, or just leave it to Elokei Avi, just leave it as something that I inherited in Amunah, but it's not something I'm going to work for. And so this is what he's saying, that the whole essence of our service of Hashem and what allows us to have this spiritual connection, which then brings us also all the brachas, begashmias and bruchnias, and eventually he brings the gula, is through having to be a personal connection. The kai mamish, that should be literally my God, who achtas Hashem apshuta, and this is the idea of God's simple unity. She kava b'yuklat b'seif lev kol echad ba'achas miYisrael, that should be implanted. In other words, we should really understand it and relate to it in a very personal way in the heart of each and every single Jew. The mitzvahs yichud elyon krishma, in this mitzvah of Kriyashma, Ishish, Kafi, Choltai. Each person, again, the Mitteler Rebbe always says each person according to their ability. That we're not demanding that you be something you're not. We're demanding that wherever level you're on, you do according to what you can do. The davka b'Hashem echad, to connect to the one God, the meicher, the liba, in his mind, his heart, the kavana, the rusa, the liba, davka with intention in the heart and with a desire that should be something that you really, it should be what you really want and your priority in life. Elav davka v'lei midais, like it says when we daven, it should be for God Himself and not for His midais, that we shouldn't get distracted by anything else. We should just want God Himself. And it says that when we commit to Hashem in this way, that when we direct our priority just to Hashem, so then Elav Yosef, and He gathers us in the Mesiras Nefesh Echad. That when we have this Mesiras Nefesh, when we say Shema, the mitzvah of God's unity of Echad, which is the idea of committing that this is my top priority, this is my identity, try to become aware of that aspect that my neshama is connected in that way. So when we connect to that and we bring that awareness in, so then so then this spirit, this arousal that we have brings a corresponding thing from above. So then the light of God's essence shines into the brachas of Shemoneh Esrei. That when we ask Hashem for the things that we need in Shemoneh Esrei, then Hashem answers our tefillos, and even in a miraculous way of changing the nature of the world, which is something that only can come from the Atzvos insight. That's something that's able to shine into our tefillah. We're called ish v'ish l'asher yispalo, of each person, whatever he davens for, v'yivakish al nafshay, and he prays for himself. And he's blessed them with what he's asking for, even for his physical needs. So we see here, this. I mean, this. First of all, I think you get a taste of the Mitteler Rebbe style, how he really speaks to people in a very passionate and very direct way. And he speaks about the importance of varying in all of his introductions and all of his sparm of how fundamental it is that the whole thing Alter Rebbe wanted is that we should understand and learn Chassidus, and this great treasure was given to us, and it has to be done without any sort of delusion, without any sort of excuses. It's very common to have the Yetzer Hara of false humility of saying, "Oh, who am I? I'm not shaykh." He says, "No, you have to. We all have to do the best we can, and without any. We shouldn't, have arrogance, but we also shouldn't have false humility. And each person on their level, we have to do it. And through doing that, that's the source of our success. I mean, the idea of Achdas Hashem is the source of our success in our spiritually and all the brachas begashmias. And like we said, it's expressed in Ahavas Yisrael, and this corrects the whole cause of Galus, and it brings the Gili of Mashiach and the Chassidus in general. Like you mentioned, in general, is idea of Fatz Mayonos, especially learning in this way, where it becomes a way of Chayas, is specifically connected to the learning in the way of Mashiach. And so we should all learn in this way, and for that we should merit the coming Mashiach right away. And so this other maamer that I gave, I think it's something, people, if they get a chance, they can learn on their own. But there, he talks about this idea in a very, very, I think, relatable way, about how the whole idea of our Vaida is to correct and attach our das, our priority to godliness, and he connects this idea of Ein ben Davar Ba'al Mitei Chespedas, that he says Amalek and Haman and Amalek represent the idea of das of Klippa, which is connecting our identity to the wrong things, and the whole idea of Mashiach and the things is connecting our identity to God's essence and having that be the what we really attach ourselves to. And he describes how that's also the source of all these brachas and things, and physically and spiritually. So I think it'd be very nice thing to learn.
Wow, thank you so much. We have a lot of thank yous on the chat. We really appreciated that, and we also really appreciate your explanation. So thank you so much. It's such a great zchus to have you here, and thank you to everyone who joined. And for everyone who earned the sefer, you can be in touch with me to come pick it up. A huge mazel tov to you, and thank you so much, Rabbi Walters, for everything.